My name is Drew. I'm 32 years old, and I spend most of my working hours with soil under my fingernails and a measuring tape clipped to my belt loop. I run a small landscape contracting company in Nashville. Just me and two guys I trust, Sal and DeMarco, hauling gravel, planting hedgerows, building retaining walls out of Tennessee fieldstone, and listening to homeowners debate whether they want a privacy fence or a pergola, like it's the single most consequential decision a human being has ever faced. It pays the bills. It keeps me outside, which is where I need to be. And it gave me, over the years, the ability to look at a patch of dead grass and dead soil and see what it could become with the right amount of work and patience. My closest friend is Harper Lawson. She's 30, a freelance graphic designer, and the kind of person who can produce a logo out of a conversation and a coffee shop napkin in 20 minutes flat. She works from home, mostly in her pajamas, and she has strong and fiercely held opinions about fonts that I have never once been able to follow. We've been friends for just over 5 years. We met when her former roommate hired my crew to redo the backyard of the house they shared. Harper came outside with 2 glasses of water, handed me one, and said, without introducing herself, "You're planting the hydrangeas too close to the fence." She was right. I moved them. That was 5 years ago. We've been like this ever since. People who see us together at a coffee shop or a hardware store always assume we're a couple. We've gotten practiced at correcting them. No, I say, just friends. Harper usually adds something like, "If we were dating, I'd have already redesigned the logo for his truck." It's bad, Drew. It's genuinely bad. Then we argue about it for 10 minutes and order another round. That used to feel completely normal. Safe. Like a well-worn pair of work boots you don't have to think about. Then Harper bought her first house. It was a small 2-bedroom Craftsman about 10 minutes from downtown Nashville. Good bones, newer roof, original hardwood floors that had been painted over by someone who deserved a citation. The backyard was the problem and the potential all at once. Roughly 30 feet by 50, completely neglected, knee-high weeds along the fence line, a concrete slab patio the size of a parking space cracked down the middle, and one determined little dogwood tree in the far corner that had survived everything thrown at it. The second she showed me the listing photos, I could already see what it could be. The weekend after she closed, she called me while I was still in bed on a Saturday morning. "No hello? Just, I need you to come to a nursery with me today." I laughed. "Why? You don't know anything about plants." "I know what I like," she said. "You know what won't die." That is the most accurate summary of our friendship I've ever heard. There was a short pause. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped just slightly. "Also, I just need somebody there. I'm kind of nervous about all of it." I was already getting up. "Give me 40 minutes. We drove out to a big garden nursery on the east side of the city, the kind of place that sells everything from annuals to mature shade trees, with long greenhouse tunnels full of warm green air and staff who actually know what they're talking about. Harper moved through the rows of perennials like she was curating an exhibit. Deliberate, purposeful. She'd crouch down to read a plant tag, then stand back up and move on without saying anything for nearly a minute. She chose a lot of color. Mexican sage and deep purple, yellow coreopsis, native black-eyed Susans for the back border. A climbing hydrangea for the fence. 2 dwarf crepe myrtles she said would anchor the whole design. I pushed the flat cart and offered structural opinions. "That one needs more sun than your yard gets. Those 2 will fight for space after 2 seasons. That's going to get 4 feet taller than the tag says. Nurseries always lowball mature height." Harper corrected my suggestions with the precision of someone who spends her entire professional life making sure every element is intentional and balanced. When I reached for a bright red salvia, she looked at me the way you'd look at someone who proposed parking a tractor in your living room. "It doesn't go with the palette," she said. "It's a plant. It's a commitment. It's $9. Every $9 decision adds up, Drew." I put the salvia back. We checked out at the main counter, an older woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the calm, unhurried manner of someone who has answered every conceivable question about soil pH. She looked at the 2 of us and the cart full of plants, and she smiled in the way people smile when they think they already understand the situation. "Your wife has a wonderful instinct for layering color," she said to me. "Most people just grab whatever's bright and call it a day." I didn't stop to think. I answered the way you answer a stranger who's made a reasonable assumption. "Yeah," I said, grinning. "She always wins the plant arguments. I'm just here for the heavy lifting." The woman laughed warmly. Harper laughed too, easily, the way you do when you're deflecting something. Then I glanced over at her. Her face had gone a shade of pink I hadn't seen before. Not the casual embarrassed kind, real color, the kind that happens when something lands in an unexpected place and you need a second to decide what to do with it. She turned away from me, toward the credit card reader, and when the woman walked off to help someone else, Harper said something so quietly I almost missed it under the background noise of the nursery. That didn't sound like a joke when you said it. I looked at her profile. She wasn't looking back at me. Her jaw was set, and she kept her eyes on the small screen in front of her. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. We loaded everything into my truck in near silence. On the drive back to her house, she watched the road instead of me, which was unusual. Harper almost always talked during car rides about client projects, podcasts she'd half listened to, the ongoing saga of her neighbor's aggressively chaotic lawn care choices. This time, she said almost nothing the whole way. I tried once. You all right? Fine, she said, just thinking about the layout. Her voice was careful, measured, like she'd decided exactly which words were safe. When we got to her house, we unloaded everything and spent the afternoon in the backyard. I mapped out the planting beds. She directed the overall composition with the confidence of someone who had already seen the finished version in her head and was just waiting for reality to catch up. At one point, she made me move a crepe myrtle 2 feet to the left, then 2 feet back, then declared the original position had been wrong all along and it needed to go against the fence instead. We're back to approximately where we started, I said. The angle is different. The angle is identical. She gave me the look she gives when she knows she's wrong and has decided not to acknowledge it. We worked until the light went long and golden across the yard, and by the time we sat on the cracked patio slab with glasses of iced tea and a box of crackers because neither of us had thought to bring real food, the backyard had already started to look like something. The bones of it were there. In a few weeks, once things rooted and settled, it would look like what she'd pictured. She sat cross-legged, staring at it, quiet for a while. Then she said softly, "Thank you." "For the heavy lifting?" I said, keeping it light. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "For being here." The words were small. They didn't land small. I wanted to ask about what she'd said at the nursery. I wanted to ask what she meant by, "That didn't sound like a joke." I wanted to know if something had shifted in the last few months that I had completely missed, or if I'd been missing it longer than that. Before I could find the right way to start, her phone buzzed with a client deadline notification, and she was suddenly apologizing and heading inside, and the moment slipped through like water through gravel. I drove home with the windows down, and the smell of turned soil still on my hands, and a feeling I couldn't quite name sitting in the center of my chest, like standing at the edge of something and then stepping back without knowing why. The following week, Harper went quiet in a way that felt new. She'd always been a constant presence in my phone, a screenshot of a logo she was proud of, a voice memo complaining about a client who wanted 12 fonts in one flyer, a random 10 p.m. question about whether I thought people could be genuinely allergic to the color beige. After the nursery, her messages shrank down to single-word replies when I reached out, and almost nothing else. I texted Tuesday, "How are the crepe myrtles holding up?" 4 hours later, "Fine." Thursday, "Did the hydrangea survive?" Yes, no punctuation, no follow-up, nothing that sounded like her. I sat in my truck during lunch eating a sandwich I didn't taste, reading those one-word messages and replaying the checkout counter in my head. How easily I'd said it. She always wins the plant arguments. The way her face had changed, the way she'd said what she said and then turned away like she needed a wall between us fast. Maybe I had touched something she'd been carrying quietly for a while, and then I had laughed it off, the way I'd laughed off every assumption for 5 years. Like being mistaken for her person was a running bit instead of, I didn't know, something else. By Friday, the specific, weighted guilt had settled in. The kind that comes from hurting someone without intending to, and knowing exactly where the wound is. I did what I know how to do when words feel like too much risk. I showed up. Harper loved the green curry from a small Thai place near her neighborhood. I ordered 2 added spring rolls, grabbed a bottle of the sparkling lemonade she kept in her fridge like a controlled substance, and drove over without calling ahead. I told myself I wasn't going to confess anything dramatic. I just wanted to hand her the food, apologize for making something feel small that wasn't, and maybe, if I could find the right words, Tell her that calling her my wife at that counter had felt natural. Too natural. The kind of thing your mouth does before your brain catches up. I knocked twice. She answered in a paint-stained t-shirt and reading glasses she hadn't realized she was still wearing. Drew. She looked genuinely surprised, then a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. I held up the bag, brought dinner. Before she could respond, a man's voice came from inside. Babe, who is it? I looked past her shoulder. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, early 30s, the kind of guy who dresses casually in a way that clearly costs money. Nice watch, clean haircut, holding a glass of white wine at 8 on a Friday night like it was the most natural thing. He looked comfortable, like he'd been here before. Harper turned back to me, her expression careful. This is Craig Wolf, she said. He's a landscape design consultant. He's been helping me plan the backyard. She paused. We've been seeing each other. The bag got heavier in my hand. Seeing each other. I ran the words back a couple of times. I knew the English language. Each word made sense individually. Together, they felt like a tool I didn't know how to hold. Craig walked over, friendly in the frictionless way of someone who's used to making good first impressions. He looked me over once, my work shirt, my calloused hands, my scuffed boots. Not unkindly, just assessing. Drew, he said, extending his hand. Harper's mentioned you. You helped get some planting started out back, right? Good, man. I shook it, something like that. He glanced at the bag. You brought dinner, thoughtful. But I was actually about to take her somewhere tonight. He smiled at Harper with the easy confidence of someone who already knew how the evening was going to end. Rain check? Harper looked at me with an expression I couldn't name. Like she was waiting to see what I'd do. I set the bag on the entryway table, kept my voice steady. No problem, it'll keep. I turned to go. And then Craig's voice drifted out from the kitchen, conversational, like he was commenting on something obvious. The yard's coming along, but honestly, Harper, the bones were wrong from the start. Whoever set up those initial beds didn't account for drainage. You'd be better off starting fresh with a proper grading plan. I know a guy who does the full package, design, install, the works. Turns out beautiful every time. I stopped. Harper said something I couldn't quite hear. Craig's voice continued, warm and reasonable. It's about getting what you actually deserve. You bought this house to make it yours. Do it right. I turned back. Harper was leaning against her own doorframe with an expression she probably didn't know was on her face. It was the same expression she'd had at the nursery. Something landing in an unexpected place. Which beds specifically have a drainage problem? I said. Craig looked at me. His friendliness tightened at the edges. The whole left border, really. The grade runs toward the foundation instead of away. That grade was corrected before we planted. We put a French drain along the fence line. Surface correction, sure. The real issue is subterranean. Who verified that? He smiled, but it didn't reach all the way up. I've been in this industry a long time. What's your contractor's license number? The smile held. I work as a consultant, different structure. Harper said quietly, Drew. I looked at her. Has he given you a contract for anything? She hesitated. That was answer enough. I said goodnight and walked to my truck. I sat there with the engine off, staring at the light in her front window. Landscape design consultant. No license. I know a guy who does the whole package. I'd spent enough years in this business to know exactly what shape that was. I gave myself one full day to be sure I wasn't being irrational. Saturday morning, I called Felix Drummond, an old contact who sold hardscape materials and knew every contractor in the Nashville metro, legitimate or otherwise. Felix, I said, you know a Craig Wolf? Calls himself a landscape design consultant. The pause on his end was short but specific. Tell me you didn't give him money. My stomach dropped. Not me, someone I care about. Felix spent the next 15 minutes telling me exactly what he knew. Craig had operated under 3 different business names over the past few years. The pattern was consistent. He targeted first-time homeowners, usually women who were newly independent or new to a neighborhood. He'd charge a few $100s for an initial design plan that turned out to be pulled from free online templates. Then he'd refer them to an install crew that paid him a finder's fee. A crew he had no accountability for, which routinely overcharged and did substandard work, protected by contracts so vague that Craig's role was legally classified as a referral connection, not a contractor. Felix had seen it cost people anywhere from $800 to nearly $5,000 before they understood what had happened. He sent me screenshots of warning posts from a neighborhood Facebook group, a review thread on a home services forum, and a photo of one of Craig's old business cards under a different company name. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I thought about Harper at that nursery counter, going still and pink when I said something true by accident, and Craig Wolf in her kitchen with a glass of wine, telling her that the work we'd built together wasn't good enough. Sunday, I went back to the nursery. The woman at the counter remembered us immediately, lit up, and confirmed she'd seen Craig Wolf there before. Always with women clients, always pointing out problems with their existing plantings, always suggesting they needed to start over with more qualified help. I asked if she'd be willing to say what she knew directly to my friend if it came to that. She looked at me over her reading glasses. Has he gotten any money from her yet? I don't know. Not much if so. Then move fast. That night I texted Harper. I need to talk to you about Craig. This is serious and I have documentation. She didn't respond for 2 hours. When she did, Drew, please don't do this. I typed back, I have documentation. This is real. No reply after that. I drove over anyway. It was past 9. Her kitchen light was on. Knocked and waited. Craig answered the door. Whatever friendly manner he'd had before was gone. He looked at me flatly. It's not a good time. I need to speak with Harper. Her voice came from inside. It's okay, Craig. Let him in. She was at the kitchen table. In front of her was a folder with papers, a contract, or what was dressed up to look like one. A logo at the top read Wolf Outdoor Design and Consultation Group. I didn't sit down. I pulled out my phone and brought up the screenshot Felix had sent, Craig's old business card under a different company name. I set the phone face up on the table. That's you, I said to Craig. He looked at it. That was a previous business structure. Completely legitimate. I swiped to the forum screenshots. 3 different homeowners, 3 different company names, the same basic story. Harper leaned forward slightly to read. The crew you'd refer her to, I said to Craig. Does he pay you a finder's fee per job? The easy smile was completely gone now. I have referral relationships. That's standard in the industry. Does Harper know that's built into this contract? Harper's voice came out quiet. Is it? Craig turned to her, his tone shifting registers immediately, softer now, reassuring. Mara, this is completely normal in design consulting. Harper, she said. He blinked. I'm sorry? My name is Harper. Her voice was very level. You've called me Mara twice now. The room went completely still. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Craig looked at the contract, then at her, then at me. He did some quick internal calculation, and when he spoke again, the warmth was entirely gone. You're going to trust someone with dirt on his boots over a guy who's actually trying to get you somewhere better? Harper looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at the folder. Then she picked up the contract, folded it once cleanly down the center, and held it out toward him. I think you should go, she said. He left without another word. The door closed, the kitchen settled into quiet. Harper put both palms flat on the table and breathed. I stayed where I was. After a moment she said, he didn't know my name. No. I told him when we met. He had it on the intake form. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh and almost wasn't. I almost gave him $2,000. But you didn't. She stood up and walked to the back window. Outside, the yard was dark, but I knew what was out there. The black-eyed Susans, the climbing hydrangea starting to find the fence, the 2 crepe myrtles she had made me move 14 times before she was satisfied. He said none of it was right, she said quietly, that it needed to start over. And part of me believed him, because I wanted to believe someone who showed up and said I deserved something better than what I had. I walked a few steps closer. Craig Wolf wasn't selling you a yard. He was selling you the idea that what you already have isn't enough yet. She turned to face me. Her eyes were bright. Why is it easier to believe the person telling you something's missing than the one who shows up and quietly builds things with you? I didn't have a clean answer. She took a step toward me. Drew, at the nursery when you said it. I know. You laughed it off. I know. My voice came out lower than I intended. I'm sorry. Why did you? I made myself answer honestly, because it felt too easy, too natural, and I've been burned before for misreading a friendship. So I backed up. I made it a joke before you could tell me it was one. She looked at me steadily. I wasn't going to say it was a joke. I stood there with that for a second. I've spent 5 years watching you look at broken things, she said. Something everyone else walks past and writes off as too far gone. And I watch you see what it becomes instead. Not what it is right now, but what it can be with the right attention and the right amount of patience. Her voice dropped lower. I've been hoping for a while that you'd look at us that way. I reached over and took her hand. She didn't pull back. I'm looking, I said. I've been looking for a while. I just needed to stop being scared of what I was seeing. She squeezed my hand once, like punctuation. We didn't follow that with a speech. We reheated the Thai food and ate at her kitchen table, while the backyard sat dark and full of roots doing their slow, invisible work. We talked for a long time about the things we'd been thinking but not saying, about 5 years of easy closeness and what had been running underneath it the whole time, quiet and necessary and real. At one point, she said, completely straight-faced, "You did grade the left border toward the foundation." I stared at her. "I'm kidding," she said, barely. We filed a complaint with the Tennessee Board and the State Consumer Protection Office the following week. Felix connected us with 2 other women who'd been through similar situations with Craig under different company names. One of them had lost nearly $4,000 to a crew he'd referred that walked off a job halfway through. The documentation was solid. It wouldn't resolve overnight, but the path was in motion. Harper didn't spend much time being angry about it. She went quiet for a while in the way that happens when someone uses your loneliness as a door and you have to sit with having opened it. She kept saying she felt foolish. I kept telling her she wasn't. That feeling isolated in a new house, in a city that doesn't quite feel like yours yet, makes people take shortcuts on trust. She didn't fully believe me at first. So I stayed, not with big gestures, just consistently present. I fixed the gate latch that had been sticking since move-in, checked the crawl space, venting after a hard rain, helped her hang curtains in the bedroom because she'd bought a rod with the wrong diameter, and spent 40 minutes reading the installation instructions in a tone of voice that suggested she was personally offended by the hardware. On the evening she didn't feel like talking, I sat on the cracked patio slab with her while the backyard did its slow, invisible work, roots deepening, everything above ground possible, only because of what was happening underground, quiet and unseen. About 2 weeks in, she came outside and sat next to me on the step and said, "The black-eyed Susans are coming back." I looked. She was right. New growth, low and green, pushing up along the bedline. It had been a rough transplant stretch. Warm days followed by late frost, the kind of spring that couldn't make up its mind. But there they were. "Told you they'd hold," I said. "You did." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm sorry I didn't ask harder questions before things went further with Craig. I wanted someone to be invested in making something good here. I wanted it to be real." I looked at her. "Someone is invested." She looked back. "Someone's been invested for a while," I said. "He's just slow." She let out a real laugh, small and genuine and bright, the kind that sounded like her at her most relaxed. Then she leaned her head against my shoulder. We didn't have a name for it yet. We didn't need one right away. What we had was real, and we both knew it, and naming it would come the same way the garden had. Not all at once, but steadily, with the right amount of attention and time. A month later, we went back to the nursery for summer annuals. On the drive over, I said, "I'm going to say something potentially embarrassing today." She turned to look at me immediately. "I'm recording this for documentation purposes." The same woman was at the counter. She recognized us, lit up, and looked at the flat of zinnias we'd picked out. "You two make a good team," she said, and left it warmly at that. Harper glanced at me sidelong, waiting. I reached over and took her hand on the counter. "We're working on it," I said. Harper's cheeks went pink, but she didn't look away. She looked at the woman, then back at me, and she squeezed my hand once, under the bright, warm lights of that nursery. On the drive home, we argued about whether the zinnias should go along the fence or anchor the center bed. She was wrong about the center bed. The drainage pattern made it technically difficult, but I let it go because I have learned that being right about drainage and being happy are not always the same thing, and I have wasted enough years being careful when I should have been present. We planted them that afternoon. I dug. She placed. At one point, she crouched beside me in the dirt, handed me a trowel, and said, "You know what your problem is?" I've been told there are several. You're good at seeing what something can become. She looked at the bed in front of us, bright and full of possibility in the late afternoon light. "But you almost missed it with us." I looked at her for a second. "Almost," I said. She nodded once, satisfied with that, and went back to work. The yard was something by then. Not finished, a garden is never really finished, but alive. The hydrangea had found the fence. The crepe myrtles stood exactly where she'd finally decided they should be. The black-eyed Susans were tall and a little ungovernable, which felt exactly right. Some people spend years looking at a piece of ground and seeing only what's wrong with it. I spent 5 years telling myself I was being careful, protecting something good by not asking what it was. What I was actually doing was standing just outside a space that was already ours, waiting for a moment I didn't realize had been building the whole time. Slow and quiet and necessary, the way roots grow in the dark before anything shows above the surface. The ground was ready. I just had to stop being afraid to put something in it.